Welcome to the Educator's EFT Podcast, sponsored by Metro RESA. Now, when you think of EFT, you may very well think of electronic funds transfer. Now, granted, we got the idea from the electronic funds transfer as it pertains to depositing money into a bank and having it readily or immediately available at an alternative location, say a store or an ATM. However, this podcast has nothing to do with money. It's about something that I would consider more important. It's about your feelings and your emotions. So Educator's EFT actually stands for an Educator's Emotions and Feelings Transfer. We are looking at how we are depositing emotions and feelings related to our environment or the changes in our environment. Say from situations like the pandemic, a hospital visit or stay, or a car accident, to only name a few. We are then looking to how those emotions, due to changes in your environment, may influence or transfer into changes in your behavior through your day-to-day activities. Welcome to the Educator's Emotions and Feelings Transfer Podcast. Our Educator's EFT podcast allows us to normalize difficult behaviors in the education profession as they relate to a variety of feelings and emotions that are being experienced, be it in your personal life or in your professional life. Changes in behavior have more to do with your mental well-being than we realize and allows you a glimpse into areas that deserve your attention. We hope that you continue to take this journey with us as we explore some of those feelings and emotions and welcome your feedback along the way. Okay? So thank you again for our first episode. And in this first episode, we have with us Dr. Leigh Ann Putman with Metro RESA. And Leigh Ann, did you want to say a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much, Granville, for having me today and for starting this podcast. I'm super excited about it and can't wait for people to hear from you and hear from other people that you'll host on here along the way. But yeah, I'm Leigh Ann and I'm the director at Metro RESA. I've been very lucky across my career to have some amazing opportunities. I started as a teacher over in North Alabama, where I grew up, taught the same at the same middle school with the same teachers who taught me. And so it was great fun, but it was a rude awakening because I was a secondary English major and I was going to be teaching Chaucer and Beowulf and Shakespeare and all the wonderful pieces of literature that have ever been created ever. And I landed in 8th grade grammar. So, so much for that. But it was quite an interesting journey in middle school as a teacher, just the combination again of hormones and attitudes and they don't even know why they're acting the way they're acting kind of, thing that you have to get used to and have to sort of counsel them through along the way. But after I left teaching, I landed for a little bit at the Southern Regional Education Board, working with middle schools across the country to implement a school improvement initiative there. Worked in the school improvement division at Georgia Department of Education for a little while, and then landed at Metro RESA as the professional learning coordinator, and then grew into the role of director. There are 15 other RESAs across the state and 15 other people like me who have the wonderful, amazing opportunity to work with educators in our state to try to improve their skills and knowledge and content areas. But in the most recent years, we've really branched out into things like wraparound services, mental health services, and some of those other areas that if we don't get those right, content areas will never be something that we can focus on if we don't get some of those other parts and pieces right. So we're really excited about the direction and the opportunities that RESAs and the RESA network across Georgia have had in the most recent years to provide some of those services as well to educators across the state.
Definitely. I know our next question is going to be about these last 2 years, but you mentioned something in regard to the 15 other executive directors, other RESAs that are in Georgia. I think it's something powerful to talk about support network. networks. So would you call that a support network for you in doing this type of work?
Most definitely. I always say every time that we get together and we have a meeting about once a month, that's like a therapy session. We can all get together and really just kind of go, oh my gosh, like I'm so glad it's not just me, and I'm so glad you guys are struggling with this too, or just shoot each other a text or an email and say, did you get that email from DOE? What does that mean? And how are you guys going to do this? And we all learn so much more, and we are so much better off when we are working together towards something. And we have several initiatives that we work together on, but then we're all very unique. RESAs are really governed by their board of control and meet the needs of their board, and which is their superintendents, and their presidents of higher ed. Within their service area, but we're all very unique, but we're all very united in our goal, which is to support educators across the state, so that they can support kids in the best way possible.
That's great. So here's the question. Would you say that over the last 2 to 3 years, you have been more cognizant of your personal mental well-being?
Oh, I would think so, definitely. I think, it's something that, if you didn't already kind of have coping mechanisms and coping skills and sort of, ways to sort of keep yourself steady, before the pandemic, you saw that quickly, because the stress on everybody, whether it was at work and trying to figure out, like for us at RESA, we really believe in that in person, face-to-face experience, whether that is a professional learning opportunity that people are having, or a job alike meeting where all of the people from a certain category, like maybe all of our curriculum directors, or all middle school principals, or whatever, those people would come together. And pivoting to a virtual setting completely, just like teachers, not nearly as difficult as teachers who were dealing with very young learners sometimes, but it was hard, and we were really stressed out about how do we make a meaningful experience for our educators and for our customers virtually. Like we just didn't really do that before, so it was stressful on all of us. I'm somebody that cares deeply about how my people are. I really truly want them to be happy people, above anything else, in their life. And I know that that was a really tough situation. We have staff members who lost family members, many family members. We had staff members who were very ill themselves, had family members who were very ill. It was stressful all the way around. Usually life will throw you a curveball at work and maybe things are going okay at home, or vice versa. But we got thrown 14 curveballs at us at the same time from every aspect of life. And I really, I think for myself, it was a stressful time because I couldn't see my folks, and it wasn't that same environment where I was at the office every day and got to lay my hands and eyes and, and hugs on everybody that we worked with. And all of a sudden we just thought, hey, we'll be gone for a couple of weeks and this will be over. And here we are, a year, 2 years, down the road, and we're still dealing with some of the fallout from it. And it's just, I think for me, I had to, get out and go for a walk, like get out from in front of my computer, get off my phone, go for a walk for a little bit, try to decompress, try to read something to get my mind off of what I was just so hyper focused on, and just the unknown, because it seemed like every day there was something new that we didn't have the answer to. And that if you gave people the answer the next day, it was a different answer. It was so difficult, because I really, I like to be able to make people feel good and confident and secure and safe. And none of us could do that for each other. And so it was tough, because again, I love my folks and I want them to be happy and I want them to, have everything they need to be successful. And it was just really hard to make sure everybody had that, and just to make sure, even now, what does it look like post pandemic? What are the things that we started doing differently that need to stick? What are the things that, we just need to forget about, that we were doing before, that we just need to go, you know what, this works better, and keep doing that. There's still just a lot of sort of like, for the first time in 2 years, we had a Georgia TAP, our alternative certification program. Our program started face to face in our auditorium with 30 people. And like, just to hear laughter and talking and music and have a full parking lot, it lifted my spirits like in ways that I really was shocked at. When I drove in and I took my parking spot and I got out and I looked around and there were cars and people in our building, like just it just I had a little skip in my step, honestly. I was really shocked at how much I think I needed that and didn't realize it.
I think you mentioned several things in this that I think is very important that we definitely say and kind of put a spotlight on. And one of those things is grief. You talked about, definitely having some team members that have gotten really sick, or you had some deaths in their families. But I also want us to make sure that we are focusing on the fact that grief isn't only about death, and grief is about just the loss. And you identified several losses. The loss of the laughter, the loss of having people face to face, the what is it called, the skin withdrawal, being able to hug people,
Yeah,
shake hands, um, and all of that comes with the same level of stages of grief that people will think based off of just death. And that's what collectively we were dealing with those moments that we had to increase those self-care, like you said,
absolutely.
go for a walk.
Yeah.
I used to give people during the pandemic, I gave people four things to focus on to decrease stress and anxiety, or feelings of depression. And that was, one, maintaining a schedule.
Yeah.
So if you got up at a certain time, continue to do that, even though you don't have to go for a drive to go home or go to work. But just keep a schedule so that you have something that's consistent. The second one was be active. So, like you said, go for a walk, whether it's around your neighborhood, whether it's going to a park, or whether it's a track, or honestly, if it's just going down the end of your driveway on back, or if you're in an apartment complex going to the end of your building and back, just making it intentional. The third one was, let's see, the third one was having a passion project.
Hmm.
So something that you're interested in, whether it's music, whether it's you watching movies, reading a book, maybe it's you wanting to start a business, and now you have an opportunity to kind of do some research. Again, this is during the pandemic when everyone was kind of merging the life of
Right.
social, professional, and everything all in their kitchen, in their office, or in their living room. But do some research. It doesn't have to be huge. I'm talking about maybe like 5 minutes of going online and looking at websites saying, "Ooh, I would like my website to look like that one day."
Right.
And then the last one was, let's see, we said, um, passion project, reading,
Mhm.
schedule. Oh, and socialization.
Yeah.
The last one was socialization, making sure that because we're in the age of technology, we are able to do this.
Yeah.
When we were the age of some of our students that we serve right now, this wasn't an option.
Right.
There were no cell phones, there were no FaceTimes. So at least trying to make that connection intentionally to
Absolutely.
just connect with somebody. So
And
those
I'll
are the
tell
four
you,
things.
I was so bad at all 4 of those, so bad at first. I was literally sitting in front of my computer, just at all hours of the day. I was not keeping a schedule. I am not one of those, like, I was the kid at the slumber party who at 9:30 was, like, asleep in her sleeping bag in the middle of the floor with everybody else running wild. Like, I'm not a night owl. And I found myself, looking at my watch and going, "It's 1 a.m. Why am I still awake?" But I had turned into a vampire. I mean, literally. And I was,
Mhm.
like sleeping until 10 o'clock in the morning and then wake, because I was working until 1 o'clock in the morning. I mean, things like that just were not me. And that really had me off kilter. I was not doing anything but thinking about work, thinking about people, thinking about, oh my gosh, this over here. I forgot did I email this part? All those things. I was just so bad at all of it. And you're so right. I mean, those things are it's like air we breathe. We need those, we need that routine, we need movement, we need, to break our thought pattern off of what we've been focused on for so long. You need all that stuff to just feel normal. And even though nothing around us was normal, trying to create some sense of like, okay, I'm going to get up, I'm still going to eat breakfast, I'm going to, take the dog for a walk, and I'm going to come back in and I'm going to work for a little while, but then I'm going to get up and I'm going to have some lunch and I'm going to go back for a walk. I mean, just those things that you needed to establish a new pattern of normal. And a lot of us didn't do that very well, and it very quickly started to get to me mentally, physically, I mean, all of it, and so I really had to think to myself, look, like for me, I love to listen to music and just take a walk. And if somebody would go, I'll walk with you, I'm like, I don't want you to walk with me. I'm with my music. Like I needed that just kind of brain break of not talking and interacting for just a minute. To
Right.
just kind of get in my own head and just sort of blank out just to the music that was in my ears. But you're so right. I mean, those were things that we needed, and we didn't always know that we needed them. So I appreciate people like you who were suggesting those things and saying, hey, this feels really gross, right now. We don't know anything about what's going on. We don't know what's coming next. But let's try to make some normal things that feel like a habit that you can just get up and do every day. Cause that, getting up, getting ready, getting in your car, for me, like it was, my commute to Metro RESA's office was about an hour and 25 minutes pre-COVID. And for me, like I'm a podcast queen. Like I listen to a million and so that was kind of my way to kind of get going in my day. And I wasn't listening to podcasts anymore. I was immediately launching into work and, not taking any time to kind of just ease into my day, that kind of stuff. And, and it really, it starts to have an impact on you.
It does. It does. And I think that what you're talking about is another one of those losses. We also lost the ability to have our mind transition from one hat to another. The hat
Absolutely.
of a parent. So this is going for our teachers, or any school faculty that we have. You had an opportunity to change that hat as you got into your car. You
Yep.
knew that that trigger of changing that hat was turning on your podcast,
Yep.
and that was something that was taken away.
Yeah, absolutely. And it
Yes.
just, it started to wear on me mentally, I think. And
Mhm.
and you just I think about all the people who were, dealing with sick loved ones and trying to maintain kids at home who were trying to do virtual learning, and that was not always going well. And, like one of our folks is a mom of 4 kids, and she had like an elementary school child, a middle school child, a high school child, and then she had one in college, and it had changed for all of them. All of them like
Yeah.
missed things that should have been those milestones, in their life at certain points during that year. But yet she was still trying to help them stay focused, then work and do virtual learning opportunities for Metro RESA, and then try to I can't imagine juggling all those balls in the air and trying to keep everything just
Yeah.
above ground.
Yeah. And I think that that's where a lot of those additional like feelings and emotions came from, was we put a lot of emotional currency into being productive when
Hmm.
we were all virtual, and what that productivity looked like. And I think that what you said echoes for all of us, or a lot of us, is that once you started making your home your workspace, that time of being productive stayed because you
Absolutely.
weren't removing from it. And so you had a lot of people doing the whole, it's 11 o'clock.
Yep.
What am I, how did I get here?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because we were pushing.
Yeah,
And just think about how that feels to go from that to where you weren't expecting it. It's one thing if you decided to go for a remote job or a virtual job, and then you're like, okay, I'm going to transition into this. But everybody got shut down and tried to figure it out. And now coming out of that, I mean, that has to be a stressor that we're not dealing
absolutely.
with or thinking about. Yeah.
And I'll tell you, one of the things that, our boards of control, as I said earlier, are the superintendents. And for example, Metro RESA, we serve the 12 um, school systems of the Metro Atlanta area. And I would host just a little check-in Zoom call for our superintendents about once a week, and just let them just kind of talk about what was going on. Sometimes it was just letting them vent a little bit about, some of their frustrations, but also trying to say, hey, Cobb County, you're right next door to us in Douglas County. Hey, Rockdale, what are you guys doing in Gwinnett? Because, being next door neighbors and having teachers who live in one district but have their kids in another, trying to sort of come up with maybe a similar schedule or similar, and that was
Right.
virtually impossible because every community is so different and their expectations were so different. And what I appreciated most about our superintendents, these people who, no matter what, 50% of the people in your district are always going to be mad at you. Like you're always going to get it wrong 50% of and a lot of
Yeah.
them, I'm sure that was exacerbated with, the expectations of parents, the fears that some people had, rational and irrational at times, about, sending their kids back to school or what was going on. But what I really appreciated the most about many of them was just that they just said, hey, I've never lived through a pandemic before. I don't know what the answers are. And what I heard the answer was 2 weeks ago from our health officials or from our, people who govern the state or whatever, what I heard from them 2 weeks ago, that's now not the answer anymore. Like we know something's changed or the science has changed or, the
Yeah.
something has changed. And so now all of a sudden, well, that's not what you said. And so just the I don't know, the difficulty of communicating with people when things were changing so rapidly, but I really appreciated their ability to just be vulnerable, because I think that's something in this day and age, with social media and just, any time that you put yourself out there, I don't care if it's just something that you say via email, via social media post, via whatever, you are gonna people are going to come down on you hard and quickly because you of something that you said and it was wrong, and I think, this or this. And I think, they were vulnerable enough to just say, hey, I don't know the answers. I'm going to
Yeah.
do the best that I can by your kids. I'm going to do the best that I can by our teachers and our educators and the people who work here, but I don't know that I'm going to get it right every single time because I've never lived through a pandemic and neither have you. So let's try to work together to figure this out because none of us have all the answers. And just, I don't know, this day and time, you look at people, whether they're elected officials or, it's like our superintendents, they're appointed or whatever, like they're supposed to know it all and know everything all the
Yeah.
time and always get it right. And, people are so fast to criticize if something doesn't go perfectly. And that was just, I mean, that's still going on with a lot of our school system folks, just that frustration. And certainly, again, none of us understood what was coming next in a pandemic. This was all new to us. But I really appreciated our superintendents just remaining vulnerable in a time where they could have gotten really hard and mad and ticky
Hmm.
with people. And most of the time they just continued to say, you know what, I I, I don't know the answers. And I'm going to consult all these different people who seem to have pieces of the puzzle. And I'm going to try to snap this puzzle together in something that looks like an answer, but it may change tomorrow.
Right.
It was just, it was so hard on them. And all I could do was just, continue to support them in ways that I could. But I thought, that's really where everybody is, whether that was a fourth grade
Yeah.
teacher who was trying her best to keep kids engaged on a virtual platform, in a way that she'd never had to do before. Staying vulnerable and just saying like that lesson. And I know that activity really stunk. Like, we're not going to do that tomorrow. Like we said, we're going to pivot. And I think that was just something that was so hard on all of us. But I hope that everybody took away from that, to be a little bit more graceful and a little, full of grace and full of
Mhm.
kindness and full of patience for people. Because we all needed that desperately, all of us, no matter how perfect, it looks like we had it. We all needed that grace across that time period.
Yeah. And also for yourselves, like having grace for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, which is
So
we never, ever, ever, ever. I know there's a meme that I had one time, and it said something about, it, would you talk to, would you talk to other people the way you talk to yourself? And 9 times out of
mhm.
10, especially in that 2-year period when it was like, God, I haven't done enough. God, that was stupid. God, whatever. When you're criticizing yourself, you would never say that to somebody sitting across a table from
No.
you. I would never say that to you in this virtual setting. Like, you would never be
Right.
as critical and harsh on your coworkers, on your family members. Oh, at least I hope you wouldn't, right? But
Right.
you would, if you wouldn't do that to other people, don't do that to yourself. But why is it so hard for us to do that all the time?
I think that that's one of those situations to where, and I think you and I talked about this off camera, but self-talk is so important because we can talk ourselves into a whole bunch of things based on the stress that's going on. Those things manifest into something physical if we
Totally.
continue to do it.
Absolutely.
Um,
And like, like I told you off camera too, I have migraines. And during that 2 years, really, when we were completely virtual, which was about 9 months or so, I would just find myself at the end of the day, every day, digging through my purse, looking for a zolmitriptan, which was my migraine medicine, and thinking like, okay, this should not be happening this frequently. But it was just that constant pace of worrying and, oh my gosh, like, I've got to set up this Zoom call. And did I forget? It was a constant, like you said, just you never changed hats. You were just
yeah.
constantly on and worried and seeing, social media posts about another friend's parent that was critically ill with COVID in the hospital. I mean, just and following these storylines and just getting so deeply embedded and entrenched in tragedy and grief, like you
Mhm.
said, and sadness. And it was just hard sometimes to lift yourself out of that.
Yeah. And one of the other things that you said, and then we'll transition into another question that kind of popped up with what you were talking about with our superintendents. Um, Part of during the pandemic, that whole trying to figure out what am I missing? What did I forget? What was going on? I'm not sure if you had the same issue that I had, but certain words or tasks that were so normal to me were just slipping out of my head. Like I couldn't remember certain things and different words that were simple. I was like, the advertisement that you hand out, flyer. Oh yeah, that's what the word. It was
Brain
flyer.
overload. I mean, it's just
It
brain
was.
overload, and I have that, all the time where I'm just, and usually for me, it's about 2:30 in the morning when I have, my insomnia kicks in. I mean, but just,
Yeah.
trying to tell yourself and having that argument with yourself of making that check off list of, oh my gosh, I think I need to check on this, and trying to resist grabbing your phone in the middle of the night and, to check off something because then you'll be wide awake and trying to calm your brain. I mean, all those things that,
Yeah.
your body will manifest it into something. It's going to be an
Yeah.
illness, something. I mean, and for me, migraines, when I get tuned up and too stressed out and can't just sort of, have a moment to chill, that's a migraine trigger for me. And certainly, over that time period, I just felt like I was more than usual, fighting that battle. And it was just stress, and it's just the American pandemic that we don't even know is out there really. We've got all kinds of pandemics, whether it's, COVID or obesity or a lot of things that are affecting Americans right now. Stress is a pandemic. And,
It
and it's
is.
not something that we talk enough about, how to combat that. And it will manifest and it will kick your butt no matter what. And no matter how good you think you are, it's going to get you. So,
It is.
talking about ways and sharing it with people, whether that's a formal way of, going and talking with a counselor, or it's just, like I said, going for a walk or whatever that is, listening to music, whatever it is that, just calms your brain and your heart and your body and soul. We don't do that enough, in this
No,
country.
no. And just for those that are listening to this, um, you're not alone.
Yeah,
That's the one thing is you're not
absolutely.
alone.
Absolutely.
And the other thing is there's a real word for it. Like what we had, they were calling it pandemic brain that was
Yeah.
happening,
Yeah.
but it's actually a real thing. It's called cortisol brain. And so you were talking about, trying to figure out how to deal with things and when's the next shoe going to drop and
Yeah.
what's the next thing going to happen. Well, that's when people are hyper vigilant. Hypervigilance is always waiting for that next shoe to drop.
Yeah.
I'm always on guard. And when you have that cortisol in your body is continually, you know, doing a number on your body, because cortisol should only be popping up in the midst of you handling a situation that is immediately stressful, and then it can go back down. But we were living with it ongoing over and over and
Absolutely.
over again.
And we have so many kids, and I think that's one thing that I've appreciated so much about the work that you do and the work that other mental health specialists do is really trying to help us understand. I was a kid, when I was in school, as a child. I grew up in a home that was not always a great place to come back to. I had a wonderful mother. I had a dad who was an alcoholic and died when he was 45 years old, from alcoholism. And home was not always a safe spot, emotionally, to come back to, an easy
Right.
spot to come back to. And I think you've got kids who have been running on cortisol brain since the day their feet hit the ground, and I think, so adding on top of that to some of our kids, the pandemic piece of it. I mean, I kept saying, like, in the time when our schools were completely closed down, I don't know what some of our kids lived through, because I remember, I was a kid who sort of channeled everything into school. Like I tried my best. I was not a straight A student. Thank you, calculus. But still, I was not, you know what I mean? I was not a straight A student, but I tried so hard and I was involved in a lot of different things and tried to be, just the perfect kid and the perfect student while I was at school. But I, remember sort of that really almost hard to focus, when you got that just constant of what is this going to happen? When's this going to happen? And like you said, waiting for the other shoe to drop and waiting and making sure that things seem perfect out on the outside. And, a lot of our kids, I mean, school is their safe place. And that is their stable place. That is where they have a meal to eat. That is where they have somebody who gives them a hug, smiles at them, says something positive to them. And it is the only place where maybe they have some control over life. And then all of a sudden that was yanked out from under them. So I think that um, I can't imagine that compounded with all of a sudden your safe space, your warm, happy place, the place where you're loved, even if you act out and don't always act like you love them back. That was gone, and all you
Right.
had was home, when home was maybe not the easiest place for you to be. So added all that together, I mean, we will be dealing with the fallout from that for years to come. It's
You're
not
right.
just a couple of years. And, post pandemic, kind of just let's beef everybody back up in math and science and ELA. I mean, we got to get everybody back to just like trying to just settle down that just grief, the mourning, the things that we lost in the pandemic.
Yeah.
I mean, all that stuff that it'll take years for people to settle back into that,
Hmm.
sort of comfort. Because I think that's what it took away from so many people is just the comfortable, whether it was the routine or the place that you went to or the people who were around you that were happier than maybe than you had at home. So I
Yeah.
do think that, certainly it was a tough time for teachers, but it was a tough time for kids. And now it's a tough time for teachers and kids trying to sort of just come back together and let school happen.
Yeah. I think what we are looking to try to do is reestablish our baseline. Like we function on a baseline, and things will happen and you can get extremely excited about certain things, and then you go back to your baseline, or if something happens you may drop because it was really traumatic, big T or small t traumatic, and then you kind of can go back up to that baseline. Well, I think everybody's baseline went all the way down because it was kind of like every day there was something new. Like you said, I'm hearing one thing today, 2 days later, I'm hearing something else. Now I'm hyper vigilant about just stepping outside my house. And that thought process is affecting every other aspect of my life.
Absolutely, and
So,
just
yeah.
school, just trying to, like, I mean, like, are we gonna have state testing? Are we am I, like, I mean, all
Yeah.
those things that were normal, that all of a sudden, like, you're thinking, "Oh my gosh, like, are my kids gonna be tested on what we did virtually? Because holy moly, this was," we tried to do the best we could, but that's not the same, and some of my kids responded
Mhm.
well, some of them didn't, and just the pressure on teachers to, thankfully
Yeah.
we had a state that responded pretty well to trying to ask for waivers and things to just say, hey, this is a pandemic, right? It's not a normal learning year. But even now, when we're like, okay, we're back to normal. No, we're not. No, we really aren't. And that makes it so hard because there's so much pressure already on our great
Yeah.
teachers to be great and for the kids to be great and to meet all their needs, and their needs are so much greater now still.
Mhm.
It just because, COVID is somewhat kind of sort of under control doesn't mean that our emotions are, or that people's households
Right.
are, or that, if you lost your mom or your dad or grandma, grandpa, who, that
Mhm.
you're not back to normal. Like, you'll never be back
Mhm.
to normal, so it's just accepting some of those things, I think, for people, when
Mhm.
we all just want to get back to business, and like it never happened kind of thing. And we just can't, and we have to acknowledge how hard it was for people.
Exactly. So earlier you talked about you doing check-ins for the superintendents, kind of to see where they were during that whole process. My question to you is, as someone that works with the high level leadership, what things do you hope they learn about their mental well-being that can trickle down to also help the rest of their staff, whether it's their schools, their principals, and so forth?
And I can't imagine how difficult their job was. As I said earlier, no matter if you opened your inbox, 50% of those emails were going to cuss you out. 50% of them were going to say, "Great," and it's just they feel that as well. They feel that stress. They want to do the best that they can do by all the kids that they serve. But I do think that for most of them, they just kind of tried to look at it and say, like, hey, when we're going to come back into the buildings, these are the things that we want to put in place to make sure that our educators feel safe. Whether that was, in Georgia, we didn't mandate much of anything. We didn't mandate masks. We didn't mandate a lot of things, which again, you got 50% of the people who wanted it, 50% who didn't. And so there's that. But we had a lot of our superintendents who said, I believe that this is what will make my folks feel safe. And then had to face the fury of parents who didn't believe whatever it was that they were implementing would make, their child feel safe. And so, but they stood their ground and they did those things. And I think that, for the most part, they really tried to show their employees, this is what I want to put in place, even if people don't agree with it, to make you feel safe. Whether it was air filtration or a mask or hand sanitation, or you saw the little partitions, the little plexiglass partitions in the lunchroom. And some of those things are still in place in certain parts of our communities and our districts, because that's what the community expects. But really just trying to focus on listening to the community, but listening to also health officials, state officials, and making the best decisions that they could. But certainly, I think, for a lot of them, we saw a mass exodus of superintendents across this country, a mass exodus. I would say the same thing probably happened in the, administrator world as far as principals and APs and that kind of thing. And it was just extremely stressful just literally walking away from a 20-year career, not retiring, walking away, and just because of the stress from it. So I think some of them handled it, as well as they could. But as far as just what I hope that they learned, I think, again, a lot of them learned it's okay to say, I don't know all the answers. It's okay to say, I'm going to consult this person, and this person, and I'm going to talk to you continuously. I'm going to post something on our website every week. I'm going to, try to give you opportunities to give us feedback, whether it's a survey or a community Zoom call or whatever, really just trying to make themselves visible and accessible, because in some of our large districts that can be difficult. They are managing, large numbers of people and large numbers of students, and they're very busy people. But I think just continuing to be open and vulnerable and just say, hey, we're all figuring this stuff out together, called life. Like I sound a little bit like Prince there, but trying to get with
but I think those were good.
it's true, honestly, like it's just, I think sometimes we look at those people like they are untouchable and they have all the answers and they know everything, and they don't. They're people, they're real people, and they get their feelings hurt over things that are the misconceptions that sometimes people have of them. And I think that's the thing, that they just tried to say, hey, look, I'm human and I'm trying to get this right, just like you are, and I think when they said that, you just kind of instantly saw people go, okay, and they realized like, hey, like, that guy's just like me. And he doesn't know all the answers to everything. But I appreciate you listening or reading my email or whatever.
Yeah. And I think that's great. I think that is the basis of all that, is just understanding that you are human.
Absolutely. And we
Because
just
sometimes our actions speak differently and we're superhuman, and we're not. We're
Yeah,
human, everybody.
absolutely. We try to treat our, like I said, you go back to like elected officials, or you go back to, again, school
Mhm.
administrators, things like that. And we look at them like they're robots, and like they don't have any feelings, or that they never get anything wrong, or whatever. And that's just not
Mhm.
true. And I think the more that we, treat them that way, the more of an exodus we are going to see. Whether
Yeah.
it's trying to find qualified people to run for an elected office, or trying to find leaders who are willing to step up and be administrators in the schools or at the district level. It's just, it's an exhausting job to have, when people just don't have any, patience, and don't have an understanding that you're human and you're doing the best that you can.
Exactly. And I know that in RESA, and specifically Metro RESA, I'm also doing some trainings for leadership, in regards to staff healing and well-being, and just some tips that they can do to increase that collectiveness or that universality, to where they feel as though it's not just me dealing with and handling this pressure. So definitely feel free to look at our website and see about training, coming into any of those. And they're virtual. It's just 2 hours, 1 hour, depending on which one you want.
Absolutely, and thank you
Um,
so much, Granville. Honestly, I just can't tell you how much that adds to the value of our organization to have you a part of it. Not just because of
Thank
the
you.
training that you're doing, but because of you, and who you are, and who you continue to show me who you are, just through doing things like this podcast and giving people multiple opportunities to have a way to just sort of sit back and think about hey, this is how I can help others, but this is also how I can help me and myself. Because if you can't pour from an empty cup. So you have to be able to, to think about yourself sometimes. And I think a lot of educators are, we're not self-centered by nature. You get into education because you love helping people. You love being around kids and helping them learn and seeing those, light bulb moments when something, clicks with them. And but you have to, whether it's professional learning for yourself about, really just learning about something that you get excited about. And like you said, sort of that passion project within your own, career area. Or if it's just something about talking about mental health and just having that check-in time with a trusted colleague, who you can just go like, I'm just kind of done, with this and I need help. Like, please talk me, talk me through this. I mean, and I think that that's one thing that we've never been able to focus on so much at Metro RESA. And I'm so grateful to you, to bring that element to our organization. It's just what we need right now more than anything.
Thank you. Thank you. And ironically enough, with you saying that, I also have one for self-care for educators. And it actually has fill your cup is a huge part of it. The one thing I will say in this podcast is I think we have been taught through the years that we're walking around kind of pouring into other people. We're pouring into other people. And I think the misconception is that we wake up every morning with another full cup. And that's not true.
No.
And you have to make sure that intentionally you are doing things throughout every day to fill your cup. And it's specific to you. They started talking about self-care, and self-care is a huge buzzword right now.
Right.
But self-care was always attached to, pedicures, manicures, massages.
All of
If
which are
that's something you don't,
right? Yeah.
right? Well, I don't know about me. I'm not a huge massage person.
Okay.
But it's one of those things that if you're not like I just said, I'm not a huge
Yeah.
massage person, so apparently I'm not doing any self-care, but it's what you like, what
Absolutely.
fills your cup.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's definitely another option on our list of offerings. But Dr. Putman, what do you think you would like for people to get out of listening to this podcast?
I think so many times, I mean, and it's one thing I'll say, social media, podcasts, other ways of learning that weren't out there 25 years ago when I started teaching. Those were not things that I could really not connect with anyone outside of my school, right? Or at the very greatest, my district. And I was the 8th grade English department. There was nobody else, and so there was just this feeling of kind of like being on an island, being alone, not really having somebody to go, did you get did you get this? And what did you do with this? There was nobody else for me to connect to in that way. And I think that's one thing that I will say is, in through podcasts, through again, even through social media, as much as sometimes I want to throw social media, into the blender and just pour it into the yard or whatever, there are places, whether that's a message board or a content board, where you can connect with people, and you may not know that person. You may not ever even meet that person in person, but something that they say or something that they post or something either makes you giggle and think, oh my gosh, like that's hysterical. I love that. That's so me. Or it's something that they're struggling with, and you get to say, oh my gosh, like, hey, I struggled with a kid just like that. Here are some strategies that I use to help that kid be successful. Or if you've got somebody who's just on the edge of like, I'm about to walk out of this, blow this popsicle stand and leave, education altogether, like trying to encourage each other. There are so many ways now that we can do that. And even a podcast, there are so many times that, again, as I said, even now, If I'm going to the grocery store, if I'm going to, even if it's close by, I'm listening to a podcast generally, sometimes so I can learn something, but sometimes just so I can feel a connection with somebody, right? And just go, oh my gosh, like, yes, me too. As we were talking about before we got started, I'm reading a book by Brené Brown right now. And so many times I have done spirit fingers, sitting there reading it to myself, because I've connected in some way with something that I was reading. And I think, listening to this podcast, and either whether it's me rambling on forever, or, whoever you're going to talk to in the future, that people will just go, oh, cool. So I'm not alone. Like, like you said earlier, I'm not by myself in feeling this way, or I'm not by myself in frustration, or I'm not by myself in loving every moment of this, or in thinking that that's hysterical, or whatever, like just that they make a connection in some way. That's what we're all lacking so many times, is just that, like, that there's somebody who saw you, like that kind of like,
Yeah.
me too, like I get you, and we all
Yeah.
have, hopefully, in our lives, that person that you don't even have to speak a word, and they know, that you're off that day, or they know that you're about to burst into laughter about something. And I hope everybody has someone like that in their life. But even if it's not a person that you get to see regularly, if it's a podcast that you listen to and it lifts your day up, or something, that it's just that
Right.
connection. And connection is everything. Relationships, connection, feeling like you're a part of something is so important. And I think that that's what I hope, that this will give to educators.
Great. I think I hope so too. I definitely hope so too. So we're at the end. Is there any questions that you have for me?
You know, I think one question that I had, I told you I'm reading a book by Brené Brown because I am signed up for a course through an organization that I belong to, around women in leadership. And so,
Mhm.
we always give kids, whether it's your high school kids or even your elementary school kids, a reading list for summer. Sometimes it's a required
Mhm.
reading list, sometimes it's a reading program at the local library or whatever, but we encourage kids to keep reading. And I think for me, that is one of those moments of self-care when there are a million other things I could be doing right now, but I think I'm just going to hole up on the couch and read for a minute. To me, that's sort of a peaceful exercise for me. And so
Right.
I would ask you if you had to name a few books that were on your must read list for teachers when
Mhm.
it comes to self care, or just, really sort of taking the time across the summer to just reflect and relax and think and build toward a positive
Mhm.
start for next year, what would those reads be?
Well, ironically enough, I have a really good friend of mine who's also a clinician. She's an avid reader, so her goal is 200 plus books a year. Don't know how she does it, but she continues to do that.
She
And
reads
we've
that many
talked
books
about
a year?
Mhm.
Wow,
Exactly.
that
She
is
really does.
impressive. That is impressive.
Yeah, she's amazing. Sometimes she's reading like 6 at a time, and I'm like, "I don't know how you process
I could never,
that."
I know, I would cross my wires too much there, so
Me too. Yeah, it'd be a whole whole 'nother book in my
yeah,
head.
absolutely, absolutely.
But I think we put together a list, and one is definitely, Brene Brown is a go-to for me. I think she's a phenomenal, clinician. I think that her insight, even for other clinicians, are great. But there's a book called Daring Greatly by Brene Brown that's a good one. Um, the Fringe Hours, Making Time for You by Jessica Turner. And then another one, and we'll have a list of those wherever we have this posted. There should be a list of other books. Another one is a good one is When the Body Says No, The Cost of Hidden Stress by Gabor Maté. Because I think that that's a huge one. Just hearing the title, your body, as we've talked about through this whole thing, will shut you down if you
Absolutely.
aren't paying attention and doing it on your own, and taking time for you. You should be the priority in your life. And that sounds selfish, especially for a lot of us that are givers. But in order for you to continue to give in the level that you would like to give, you have to be 100% you. Your cup has to be full.
Absolutely.
And so self-care is necessary. Not just important, but it's necessary for you to continue to give what you give.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And thank you for that. I think, again, I would love to see, some staff book studies, around some of those books, or with your grade level partners or your team or your entire staff. I think those would be wonderful suggestions for administrators, if they're interested in doing book studies, or, hey, maybe we can even do a book study, of educators who would be willing to kind of come together and talk about those things. Because I just think that, like you said, we're always giving, especially for those folks who maybe have kids and they're trying to do that work-life balance. And there's just, it seems like there's no way to do it. You have to take that time to think about what you need before you can give. You're so right.
Yeah.